Dr. Melissa Carter adjusted the collar of her ceremonial uniform as the shuttle descended through the amber clouds of Voldera Prime, the diplomatic mission patch on her shoulder. Earth's continents outlined in silver thread against a field of blue seemed almost quaint compared to the technological wonders she'd witnessed since arriving in Volderi space 3 days ago. "Nervous, Doctor?" Captain Reynolds asked from the pilot's seat, her eyes never leaving the navigation display. "Cautiously optimistic," Melissa replied, the practiced response feeling hollow now that the moment had actually arrived. She'd spent 2 years preparing for humanity's first formal contact with an advanced extraterrestrial civilization. All those simulations, language immersions, and cultural briefings couldn't capture the visceral reality of being the first human to set foot on an alien homeworld. The shuttle banked around a floating crystal spire that pulsed with internal light. Below, the Volderi capital spread out in concentric rings, buildings flowing like liquid metal, continuously reshaping themselves according to some aesthetic algorithm Melissa couldn't begin to comprehend. "Remember," Reynolds said, "the extraction team is positioned in the outer system. Emergency protocols are in place." Melissa nodded. The military contingent had been insistent on rescue preparations, despite her protests that such precautions sent the wrong message. "This is a diplomatic mission, Captain. If we approach every new species expecting conflict, we'll certainly find it." Reynolds didn't respond, but her tightened grip on the controls spoke volumes. Their vessel settled onto a prismatic landing platform where a delegation awaited. The Volderi stood nearly 7 feet tall, their sinuous bodies covered in iridescent scales that shifted color with their movements. Ambassador Kalox, distinguished by elaborate golden markings across his crest, stepped forward as the shuttle doors opened. "Dr. Carter," he intoned, his translator rendering his harmonics into perfect English. "You honor us with your presence. The Confederacy welcomes Earth's emissary." Melissa stepped down onto alien soil, fighting to maintain her diplomatic composure when every nerve ending screamed that she was making history. "The people of Earth extend greetings of peace and friendship to the Volderi Confederacy," she replied, carefully reproducing the formal tonal patterns she'd studied. Kelox's crest fluttered. Approval, according to her briefings. "You speak well for one whose species lacks auxiliary vocal chambers." "I'm a quick study," Melissa smiled. The diplomatic party moved through the capital, Melissa documenting everything through her augmented lenses. The Volderi had achieved seeming impossibilities. Gravity manipulation, matter reconfiguration, biological architecture that merged technology with living tissue. Buildings communicated with their occupants, vehicles operated on thought alone, and energy flowed freely without apparent generation sources. "Your achievements are remarkable," Melissa observed during a tour of their sciences ministry, where researchers manipulated subatomic particles with casual gestures. "We have had 30,000 years of civilization to perfect our ways," Kalox responded. "Your species has accomplished much in your brief ascendance." Something in his tone, a subtle harmonic her translator didn't quite capture, gave Melissa pause. Was that condescension or something else? Beneath the sciences ministry, in chambers not included in the official tour, Supreme Commander Vrex reviewed the intelligence briefings on the human visitor. "Their emissary continues her exploration of approved sectors," reported Security Director Malik. "She shows particular interest in our energy distribution systems." Vrex's scales darkened to deep purple, "and our monitoring devices. Functioning as expected. We're recording all her communications with their orbital vessel." Vrex studied the holographic display showing the human female. So fragile-looking, these mammals, with their soft exteriors and primitive biological systems. Yet troubling. The Confederacy's analytical engines had been processing human transmissions since first detecting their signals 50 cycles ago. The projections were disturbing. "Show me the development curve again," he ordered. A shimmering graph appeared, plotting technological advancement against time. The Volderi line rose in a steady, dignified progression over thousands of years. The human line, beginning far below, angled sharply upward in recent centuries, a nearly vertical ascent. If these projections hold, Malik observed, they will achieve military parity within 70 years, potential superiority within 200. Unacceptable. Vrex's secondary breathing slits flared. The Confederacy has maintained galactic preeminence since before these creatures walked upright. Their development pattern is unnatural. They adapt quickly. Their brief lifespans seem to accelerate their innovation rather than limit it. Vrex gestured dismissively. Their diplomatic overtures are merely buying time while they advance. The High Command is unanimously convinced humanity represents an existential threat to Voldari dominance. The emissary appears genuinely committed to peaceful relations, Malik noted. No doubt she believed her mission sincere, Vrex conceded. The most effective tools are those that don't know they're being used. We will continue the charade while battle group domination moves into position. The human colonies in the Procyon sector will be our first targets. And the emissary. Vrex's mouthparts curved into what passed for a Voldari smile. She will serve as the perfect demonstration. When the rest of her kind witness her fate, they will understand the price of challenging the natural order of our galaxy. The grand concourse of unity shimmered under artificial starlight, its vaulted ceiling projecting the constellations of both Earth and Voldera Prime in an elaborate display of cosmic harmony. Dr. Melissa Carter stood at the ceremonial table, datapad in hand, reviewing the final treaty text. After 3 weeks of negotiations, the framework for interspecies cooperation was ready for signing, the culmination of humanity's first diplomatic engagement with an advanced civilization. We're making history today, she said, smiling at Ambassador Kelox across the table. Indeed we are, he replied, his scales shifting to a formal ceremonial pattern of gold and crimson. 2 billion humans across 5 colonies watched the live broadcast, a testament to the mission's importance. On the flagship observation deck, Captain Reynolds paced, unable to shake her growing unease. Scanning shows unusual energy signatures in the chamber, Lieutenant Park reported. Could be interference from their technology, but... Reynolds leaned over the console. But... Pattern matching suggests weapons capacitors. Reynolds reached for the emergency comm. Dr. Carter, abort the ceremony. Repeat, abort immediately. Her warning dissolved into static as communication channels went dead. In the grand concourse, Melissa noticed the sudden silence of her earpiece but continued her prepared remarks, years of diplomatic training taking over. With this agreement, we establish a foundation for cultural exchange, scientific collaboration, and mutual defense. Supreme Commander Vrex entered from a side chamber, flanked by Voldari military elites in full ceremonial armor. The crowd of dignitaries parted, their scales rippling with what Melissa now recognized as anticipation. Is there a change to the proceedings? She inquired politely, diplomatic smile never wavering despite the sudden shift in atmosphere. There is, Emissary Carter, Vrex announced, his voice amplified throughout the chamber and across the broadcast. The Voldari Confederacy has carefully evaluated humanity's place in the galactic order. Melissa felt a cold realization spreading through her chest. Commander, whatever concerns you have, we can address them through diplomatic channels. Your species represents an unacceptable anomaly. Vrex continued as if she hadn't spoken. Your accelerated development threatens the established hierarchy of civilizations. The High Command has determined that preemptive action is necessary. Melissa stepped back from the table, abandoning pretense. This is a peace summit protected by interstellar conventions. Whatever you're planning. Conventions established by the Confederacy, Vrex interrupted. They apply only to recognized species. The ceremonial guards raised crystalline weapons. Outside the massive windows, massive warships decloaked, their weapons ports glowing with building energy. Ambassador Kelox, Melissa appealed, your people agreed to these negotiations in good faith. Kelox's scales flattened against his body. The negotiations served their purpose, Doctor. Your presence here confirmed what we suspected. Humans are dangerously unpredictable. You came alone, without military escort, into the heart of our territory. Such confidence borders on madness. It's called trust, Melissa replied, straightening her spine. The foundation of any meaningful peace, a luxury the Confederacy cannot afford. Vrex gestured, and a holographic display activated, showing real-time feeds of Volderi attack fleets approaching human settlements. As we speak, our forces move to neutralize your colonial outposts. Your species will be contained across billions of kilometers in the colonies of New Anchorage, Proxima Haven, and Liberty Point. The first energy barrages tore through civilian habitats. Emergency beacons flared to life, broadcasting distress calls that would take hours to reach Earth. Melissa fought to maintain composure as the implications sank in. This act of war will not go unanswered, she warned, voice steady despite her racing heart. You misunderstand, Vrex replied with cold precision. This is not war. It is pest control. The commander raised his primary appendage, and the guards took aim. For the security of the Confederacy and the natural order of galactic civilization, the judgment is rendered. He paused, ensuring the broadcast captured his next words. Let all species witness the consequence of evolutionary overreach. In the flagship observation deck, Captain Reynolds watched in horror as the execution unfolded on screen. Her fist slammed into the emergency protocols panel, shattering its casing. Prepare for immediate jump to Earth, she ordered, voice breaking. And God help the Volderi when we return. Admiral James Wilson's shuttle cut through the darkness of the asteroid belt, its stealth systems rendering it invisible to all but the most specialized detection arrays. At 63, with silver hair and a face mapped with the deep lines of command, Wilson had hoped to never make this journey. The emergency authorization codes burned in his pocket. Physical credentials, immune to digital interception, that would wake humanity's sleeping giants. Approaching Cirrus Station, Admiral, the pilot announced, receiving automated challenge. Wilson placed his palm on the authentication panel. Admiral James Wilson, authorization Prometheus Actual. Validation phrase. The wings of Icarus have melted. A moment of silence followed before a synthetic voice responded. Identity confirmed. Welcome home, Admiral. The massive asteroid's surface split open, revealing a cavernous hangar bay large enough to swallow a small moon. As they descended, Wilson gazed at the installation that officially didn't exist. The graveyard, humanity's greatest secret and final insurance policy. General Eleanor Hayes met him at the landing pad, her uniform bearing no insignia or rank. Those who served here existed outside the normal chain of command. I was hoping we'd never see this day, she said, bypassing formal salutes. That makes two of us, Wilson replied, falling into step beside her. Status report. All systems operational. We've maintained continuous upgrades as specified in the Prometheus protocols. The fleet is ready for reactivation. They entered a control center buried deep within Cirrus, where massive holographic displays showed the solar system and beyond. Red markers indicated the colonies under attack, while blue markers represented humanity's known military assets, a pitiful defense against the Volderi onslaught. Show me the true inventory, Wilson ordered. Hayes nodded to a technician, who entered a series of commands. The display transformed, green markers blooming throughout the system like stars coming alive at dusk. Hundreds, then thousands of vessels in hidden locations throughout Sol space. My God, Wilson whispered. I knew the numbers, but seeing them. Operation Sleeping Dragon has maintained battle readiness for 60 years, Hayes explained. Each vessel equipped with adaptive systems designed to counter known and theoretical alien technologies. And the crews. Reserve personnel have been training in simulation for their entire careers. We can have the first wave crewed and operational within 18 hours. Wilson's attention fixed on a massive vessel designation near Jupiter's orbit, the UES Redemption. Fully operational, Hayes confirmed. Planet killer capability intact, though I pray we won't need it. Wilson walked to a secondary console displaying footage of Dr. Carter's execution, now being broadcast by emergency channels throughout human space. Her final defiance, standing tall before her murderers, had already become a rallying symbol. The Volturi believe they've encountered a fragmented, peaceful species unprepared for war, Wilson said quietly. They have no idea what they've awakened. Hayes gestured to another screen showing civilian evacuations from the outer colonies. The public is panicking. They don't know about any of this. That was by design, Wilson reminded her. After the unification wars, humanity needed to believe we'd moved beyond our violent past. The truth would have undermined everything we were building. And now, Wilson straightened, decision made. Send the activation codes. All of them. Wake every ship, every weapons platform, every defense system. Deploy the Nova Protocol communications package. I want every vessel linked to our tactical network within 6 hours. The Volturi will detect the power signatures once we begin full activation, Hayes warned. Good, Wilson replied, his voice hardening. Let them see what's coming. Let them spend their last hours wondering what else they don't know about us. He turned to the communications officer. Send this message to all Prometheus personnel. The emissary has fallen. Lazarus rises. Redemption approaches. Throughout the solar system, in hidden bases buried within moons, disguised as mining operations in the asteroid belt, and concealed beneath the clouds of gas giants, men and women received the call they had trained for, but hoped would never come. Massive doors opened on forgotten installations, revealing sleek warships with predatory lines, their hull markings displaying the ancient symbols of humanity's warrior past alongside modern weaponry that would make even the Volturi pause. The awakening had begun. Fleet Commander Xerex of the Volturi Confederacy studied the tactical display with satisfaction. The initial strikes against human colonies had proceeded with minimal resistance. Their primitive defense systems had barely registered the approaching Volturi vessels before falling silent. Status report on the human response, he ordered. As predicted, Commander, his intelligence officer replied. Their remaining military vessels are consolidating around their homeworld. Long-range scans detect increased energy output from their lunar bases and orbital platforms. Preparations for a desperate defense, Xerex noted. Their tactical doctrine is as predictable as their diplomacy was naive. A junior officer approached with evident hesitation. Commander, we're detecting unusual energy signatures near their gas giant. Jupiter. Specify. Unknown configuration, sir. Possibly mining vessels attempting to hide in the radiation belts. Xerex dismissed the concern with a casual gesture. Civilian evacuation efforts. Continue monitoring, but maintain focus on our primary objectives. Aboard the UES Redemption, Captain Malcolm Hayes studied the holographic representation of the Volturi fleet staging area. 30 vessels of the First Strike Group floated in formation around his command ship, their matte black hulls absorbing light rather than reflecting it. Each one represented a different class of warship designed for specific tactical scenarios against extraterrestrial threats. Jump calculations complete, Captain, his executive officer reported. All vessels report ready status. Hayes nodded, feeling the weight of history on his shoulders. The son of General Eleanor Hayes, he had been born into the Prometheus program, raised from childhood to command this fleet if the day ever came. Communication from Admiral Wilson. The comm officer announced. Wilson's face appeared on the main screen, transmitting from Cirrus Command. The Volturi believe they have 3 days before we can mount any meaningful response. We're going to show them what humanity can accomplish in 3 days. He paused, his expression grim. You watched Dr. Carter die. Make it count. Understood, Admiral. Hayes turned to his crew, men and women who had trained together for years while maintaining cover identities throughout the solar system. Attention all hands. The moment we've prepared for has arrived. Each of you knows what's at stake. He activated the fleet-wide channel. All vessels. This is Captain Hayes. Our mission is precise and limited, We will demonstrate humanity's capability and resolve without engaging in total war. Target weapon systems and propulsion only where possible. We are soldiers, not executioners. Hayes settled into the command chair. Execute jump on my mark. 3, 2, 1. Mark. The space near the Volderi staging area rippled as reality itself seemed to tear open. 30 human warships materialized simultaneously in a perfect attack formation, their weapons already locked on pre-calculated targets. On the Volderi command vessel, alarms screamed as sensors registered the impossible. Multiple unknown vessels. The tactical officer shouted. They've appeared inside our defensive perimeter. Xerex rose from his command chair in disbelief. How? Their technology doesn't include jump capability. Energy signatures don't match any known human vessels. The science officer reported, mandibles clicking in agitation. These ships aren't in our database. Raise shields. Bring weapons online. Xerex ordered. Too late. The human vessels opened fire with perfect synchronization, their weapons calibrated to specific frequencies that sliced through Volderi shields as if they weren't there. Captain Hayes watched with cold satisfaction as the tactical display registered hits across the Volderi fleet. Status report. Targets Alpha through Kappa neutralized. His tactical officer confirmed. Minimal casualties. Their life support systems remain intact. They're attempting to coordinate a counterattack, the sensor operator warned. Hayes nodded. Execute secondary strike protocol. Smaller craft launched from the human vessels, each targeting the weapon systems of the remaining Volderi ships with surgical precision. The attacking forces moved with uncanny coordination, as though they had rehearsed this exact battle countless times, which, in simulation, they had. Within 11 minutes, 2/3 of the Volderi fleet hung powerless in space, their weapons disabled and propulsion systems offline. The remaining vessels are attempting to jump out, reported the tactical officer. Let them go, Hayes ordered. They have a message to deliver. He opened a channel to all frequencies, ensuring every Volderi ship would receive the transmission. This is Captain Malcolm Hayes of the United Earth Ship Redemption. You murdered our diplomat. You attacked our people. This is our answer. He paused, letting the words sink in. We could have destroyed you completely. Remember that when you report to your leaders. The surviving Volderi ships vanished into jump space, fleeing toward their home systems with news that would shatter the Confederacy's confidence. Humanity was not what they appeared to be, and the retribution had only just begun. Captain Sophie Reynolds stood before the central holographic display in the Lunar Command Center, watching as dormant military installations across the solar system winked to life. Mining stations transformed as hidden compartments opened to reveal weapon emplacements. Civilian research outposts unfolded additional structures housing advanced sensor arrays. Transport vessels shed their commercial exteriors, revealing sleek warships beneath. It's like watching magic, murmured Lieutenant Commander Jackson beside her. All this time. Not magic, Reynolds corrected. Foresight. The display shifted to historical footage from 60 years earlier, the signing of the unification accords that had ended Earth's final global conflict. The assembled world leaders appeared solemn as they signed the documents establishing the peaceful Terran cooperative. What they didn't broadcast, Reynolds explained, was what happened after the cameras stopped rolling. The footage continued, now showing classified material as the same leaders moved to a secure chamber beneath the Geneva complex. There, they signed a second document, the Prometheus Protocols, establishing humanity's shadow defense network. We knew we weren't alone in the universe, Reynolds said. The question was never if we would encounter other civilizations, but when, and whether they would come as friends or conquerors. Jackson studied the historical figures with newfound respect. They built peace for public consumption while preparing for war in secret. They built a shield while extending a hand, Reynolds corrected. Dr. Carter believed in that extended hand. She deserved better than what happened. Reynolds accessed a secured file with her command codes. Dr. Melissa Carter's personnel file appeared, including private journals from her diplomatic training. "Listen to this," Reynolds said, activating an audio recording. Dr. Carter's voice filled the command center. Diplomatic Assessment 347. Volderi communication patterns show concerning inconsistencies between their stated peaceful intentions and their resource positioning. While I maintain optimism about establishing meaningful relations, I've forwarded my concerns to military intelligence for contingency planning. I still believe direct engagement represents our best path forward, despite the potential personal risk. Jackson looked up sharply. She knew. She suspected their intentions but went anyway. She believed peace was worth the risk, Reynolds said quietly. What she didn't know was that her mission served multiple purposes. While she worked to establish diplomatic relations, her neural implants gathered critical intelligence on Volderi technology, defenses, and vulnerabilities. She was gathering intelligence, not consciously. The implants operated independently, transmitting data back to Prometheus Command. Data we're using now to calibrate our weapon systems. The display shifted again to show the current deployment of human forces. Across the solar system, concealed shipyards had begun mass-producing specialized combat vessels. Defense platforms previously disguised as communication arrays moved into strategic positions. Troop transports accelerated toward forward staging areas near the jump points. The Volderi thought they knew our capabilities, Reynolds continued, but they only saw what we wanted them to see. For every visible military installation, we built 3 hidden ones. For every warship in our public fleet, 10 more waited in reserve. A priority communication alert flashed across the display. Admiral Wilson's face appeared, his expression grave but determined. "Captain Reynolds, your battle group is authorized for deployment. Proceed to coordinates Delta 9 and prepare to secure the jump point to the Proxima system." "Understood, Admiral. What about the civilian evacuation?" "Already underway, but we've had reports of Volderi forces attempting to block escape vectors. Your first priority is to clear a path for the refugee ships." Reynolds nodded. "We'll get it done." After Wilson's image faded, Jackson asked the question weighing on many minds. Do we have enough? Even with all this hidden strength, the Volderi Empire spans dozens of systems. Reynolds studied the tactical display, watching as more green indicators appeared throughout Sol's face. "We don't need to defeat their entire civilization. We just need to demonstrate that conquering humanity would cost more than they're willing to pay." She activated her command channel. "All personnel of Battle Group Phoenix, report to deployment stations. We launch in 30 minutes. As crew members rushed to their positions, Reynolds paused at the memorial wall where Dr. Carter's image had been added. Her hand briefly touched the display. "They thought they were extinguishing a candle," she said softly. "Instead, they've ignited a sun." Supreme Commander Vrex stood before the Galactic Conclave, his scales dulled with stress as representatives from 17 spacefaring civilizations regarded him with varying degrees of concern and suspicion. The Grand Chamber on Neutral Nexus Station hummed with tense murmurs as diplomatic translators worked overtime. "The human threat cannot be overstated," Vrex insisted, gesturing toward the holographic display showing footage of human warships devastating the Volderi defense fleet. They concealed their true military capabilities, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal their expansionist agenda. Ambassador Korlax of the Selenite Collective leaned forward, compound eyes reflecting the holographic light. "You claim they attacked without provocation, yet our intelligence suggests your forces struck first. A preemptive security action." Vrex countered smoothly, based on irrefutable evidence of human aggression. They sent their emissary as a distraction while positioning their fleet for a surprise offensive. The Dravian representative, a gelatinous entity suspended in a hovering containment field, pulsed with skepticism. "Your evidence is selective. Our analysis suggests the human diplomat genuinely sought peaceful relations." "Appearances can deceive," Vrex replied. The humans have demonstrated technological capabilities far beyond what they disclosed. Their jump drives alone represent a strategic threat to established territories. We must form a united front before they consolidate their initial victories. Across the chamber, hidden observation platforms house representatives from lesser powers. Among them, Lieutenant Ryan Jackson and his intelligence team monitored the proceedings, transmitting data back to Admiral Wilson. "They're painting us as the aggressors," Jackson whispered, and some delegates seemed to be buying it. Commander Natasha Volkov, Earth's covert intelligence chief, nodded grimly. "The Voldari have spent centuries building alliances. We're the newcomers with unknown intentions. We need to change the narrative," Jackson said. Volkov smiled thinly. "Fortunately, we came prepared." On the main conclave floor, Vrex was building toward his conclusion. The Confederacy requests military support from all aligned civilizations under the Mutual Defense Compact. The humans must be contained before. A chime interrupted his speech as every delegate's personal data terminal activated simultaneously. Confused murmurs spread through the chamber. "What is this?" demanded the conclave speaker, a neutron-dense Hulverin, whose crystalline exoskeleton sparkled under the chamber lights. "Unauthorized transmission," Vrex sputtered. "Security protocols have been breached." But it was too late. On every screen appeared complete diplomatic records from Dr. Carter's mission, unedited and authenticated by quantum encryption. The delegates watched in stunned silence as the full context of the Voldari betrayal unfolded. The planned execution, the coordinated strikes against civilian colonies, the deliberate strategy to portray humans as aggressors. Most damning was footage from Voldari command chambers, showing Vrex himself discussing the evolutionary threat humans posed and the necessity of eliminating them before they could achieve competitive status in the galactic community. The Selenite ambassador's antennae quivered with outrage. "You executed a diplomat under protection of interspecies conventions. The situation required decisive action," Vrex insisted, his scales now fluctuating between defensive patterns. "The humans represent an unprecedented evolutionary anomaly. Their rate of advancement threatens the established order." "You feared competition," the Dravian representative pulsed, "not aggression." Before Vrex could respond, emergency alerts blared throughout the station. The main display switched to real-time footage of a massive energy discharge striking the human colony New Anchorage. The continuous beam cut through planetary defenses, atmosphere, and finally the planet's crust itself. Within minutes, the once thriving settlement of 8 million souls existed only as superheated debris. "You deployed a star-killer weapon against a civilian target," the conclave speaker stated, its crystalline voice resonating with rare emotion, "in direct violation of the galactic conventions." Vrex straightened, abandoning pretense. "Extreme threats require extreme measures. The humans cannot be allowed to establish themselves as a major power. Those who stand with the Confederacy will share in our inevitable victory. Those who oppose us." The threat hung in the air as delegates exchanged troubled glances. The Voldari delegation withdrew from the chamber, their diplomatic status now precarious. In the hidden observation bay, Jackson received an emergency transmission from Admiral Wilson. "The gloves are off." Wilson's voice was tight with controlled fury. "Operation Daybreak is authorized. Get your team to the insertion point. You're going to the Voldari homeworld." Jackson looked at the still smoldering remains of New Anchorage on the display and thought of his parents, who had retired there just last year. "With pleasure, sir," he replied. "With pleasure." The stealth insertion craft glided through Voldari space, its adaptive hull absorbing and redirecting scanner pulses to appear as nothing more than background radiation. Lieutenant Ryan Jackson checked his tactical display as the vessel approached the massive orbital defenses surrounding Voldara Prime. "Proximity alert," the pilot whispered. "Patrol craft at 9 o'clock." The team held their breath as a Voldari security vessel passed within kilometers of their position, its searchlights sweeping the void. Sophisticated jamming technology masked their life signs and power emissions, rendering them effectively invisible. Clear, the pilot finally announced. Jackson studied the holographic representation of their target, the Central Military Command Complex in Voldera's capital city. Review the mission parameters one more time. He instructed his team of 12 operatives, the best special forces soldiers humanity had to offer. Primary objective: infiltrate Central Command and extract intelligence on military leadership and capabilities, recited Lieutenant Commander Patel, his demolition specialist. Secondary objective: identify and capture Supreme Commander Frex for war crimes prosecution. And if capture isn't possible, Jackson prompted. Termination is authorized. Patil answered evenly. Jackson nodded, then opened a secure channel to Admiral Wilson. The quantum encrypted communication was undetectable even by Voldera's advanced technology. Nighthawk team approaching insertion point, Admiral. Awaiting final authorization. Wilson's image appeared, his expression grave. Lieutenant, there's been a development. The main fleet is 6 hours from the Voldera home system. Once we arrive, there will be no hiding our intentions. Sir, the Redemption's planet killer capability has been brought to full readiness. A heavy silence fell over the insertion craft. Everyone understood the implications. If their mission failed, the UES Redemption would target Voldera Prime itself, potentially ending an entire civilization. The Security Council is divided. Wilson continued. Many advocate for complete retaliation after New Anchorage. Others argue we'd be committing the same atrocity we condemn. Jackson thought of the 8 million souls vaporized on New Anchorage, his parents among them. The desire for vengeance burned in his chest, yet something held him back from embracing it fully. What's your assessment of civilian sentiment on Voldera Prime? He asked. Intelligence suggests widespread ignorance of the true situation, Wilson replied. Their media is state-controlled. Most citizens believe they're defending against human aggression. Jackson made his decision. Request permission to modify our mission parameters, sir. If the Voldera population is being manipulated, they deserve the truth before any final judgment. Wilson studied him carefully. You've lost as much as anyone, Lieutenant. Why show mercy? Because Dr. Carter would have wanted it, Jackson said simply. And because I don't want to become what we're fighting against. After a moment, Wilson nodded. Modified parameters approved. Your primary objective now includes broadcasting unaltered footage of recent events to the Voldera public networks. Show them what their leaders have done in their name. Understood, sir. One more thing, Lieutenant. Recent intelligence indicates Supreme Commander Vrex is planning a public execution of captured human prisoners tomorrow. A demonstration of Voldera power. The prisoners include civilian scientists from the Proxima Haven Research Station. Jackson's jaw tightened. We'll get them out, sir. Good hunting, Nighthawk. Wilson out. As the transmission ended, the insertion craft broke through the upper atmosphere, using a rare magnetic storm as cover for their descent. The Voldera capital spread below them, a sprawling metropolis of crystalline spires and flowing architectural forms. Beautiful, murmured Sergeant Diaz, the team's communications specialist. Hard to believe something so lovely could harbor such darkness. That's the thing about darkness, Jackson replied, checking his plasma rifle one final time. It hides best in plain sight. The craft's landing struts extended as they touched down in an abandoned industrial sector on the city's edge. According to intelligence, a network of maintenance tunnels could grant them access to the central districts undetected. Comms check, Jackson ordered as his team donned their adaptive camouflage suits, the material shifting to match their surroundings. Each soldier confirmed operational status, their expressions solemn beneath tactical visors. They were the tip of the spear, 12 humans against an alien world. Remember, Jackson said as the deployment hatch opened, we're not just fighting for vengeance. We're fighting for truth. Move out. Lieutenant Ryan Jackson stood in the shadows of the massive central plaza, watching as Voldari citizens gathered for what their government had promoted as a demonstration of justice. A towering holographic display showed Supreme Commander Vrex addressing the crowd, his scales gleaming in ceremonial patterns. Today, we show the consequence of aggression against the Confederacy, Vrex proclaimed as guards led a group of human prisoners onto the elevated platform. These invaders sought to undermine our rightful place in the Galactic Order. The prisoners, scientists from Proxima Haven, stood with dignity despite their obvious mistreatment. Among them, a gray-haired woman met Vrex's gaze without flinching. "Sergeant Diaz," Jackson whispered into his comm. "Status on the broadcast override." "Ready on your signal, Lieutenant," came the reply from their hidden position in the communications hub. "We've tapped into their primary networks. When you give the word, every screen on the planet will show our footage." Jackson nodded to his assault team, positioned strategically around the plaza. "Prepare for extraction on my mark. Commander Patel, are the charges set?" "Affirmative." "Diversionary explosions ready at locations, Alpha through Delta." Jackson took a deep breath, thinking of his parents, of Dr. Carter, of New Anchorage. The human fleet was now just outside the system, including the Redemption with its planet-killer capability. What happened in the next few minutes would determine whether they would use it. "Begin countdown," he ordered. "Diaz, initiate broadcast in 3, 2, 1, now." Across Voldara Prime, from the grandest government displays to personal communication devices, every screen flickered and changed. The assembled crowd gasped as Vrex's speech disappeared, replaced by footage of the real history. Dr. Carter's peaceful mission, her execution, the unprovoked attacks on human colonies, and finally, the devastating obliteration of New Anchorage. On the platform, Vrex froze in confusion, then rage as his own words played for all to hear. "The humans represent an evolutionary threat that must be eliminated before they can challenge us. Their elimination is not merely strategic but necessary for the natural order." "Lies," Vrex shouted, but his voice was drowned by the murmurs spreading through the crowd. "This is human deception. The footage is authenticated by quantum signature." Jackson's voice boomed through the plaza's sound system. "Your leaders have led you into a war based on fear, not defense." Confusion rippled through the Voldari citizens. Some backed away while others pressed forward, demanding explanations from the suddenly nervous guards. "Now," Jackson ordered. The diversionary explosions detonated across the city, carefully placed to damage only military infrastructure without civilian casualties. In the ensuing chaos, Jackson's assault team emerged from concealment, converging on the platform with precision that spoke of years of training. The Voldari guards, caught between protecting their commander and responding to the explosions, hesitated. A fatal mistake. Within seconds, Jackson's team neutralized the security forces with targeted stun weapons designed specifically for Voldari physiology. Vrex reached for his ceremonial weapon, but froze as Jackson's plasma rifle pressed against his primary breathing slit. "Supreme Commander Vrex," Jackson announced, his voice still broadcasting across the plaza. "By authority of the United Earth Government, you are under arrest for war crimes, including the execution of a diplomatic envoy and the murder of 8 million civilians on New Anchorage." "You have no authority here," Vrex hissed. "We have the authority of truth," Jackson replied, nodding toward the still-playing footage. "And the authority of that." He pointed skyward where the atmosphere parted to reveal the human fleet moving into position. Dozens of warships led by the massive UES Redemption, its weapons ports glowing with potential devastation. Admiral Wilson's voice joined the broadcast. "People of Voldara Prime, your military leadership has committed atrocities against humanity without your knowledge or consent. We do not hold your population responsible for these crimes." As Wilson spoke, Jackson's team freed the human prisoners and secured Vrex in restraints. "We offer you a choice," Wilson continued. Surrender those responsible for war crimes to face justice, establish a civilian transitional government, and we will withdraw our forces. Refuse, and we will have no choice but to consider all military assets on your world legitimate targets. Throughout the capital, Voldari military units found themselves surrounded by their own citizens, many of whom had family members in the military who had privately questioned the conflict. The revelation of their leader's deception broke the final threads of loyalty. Within hours, military bases across the planet signaled surrender as civilian administrators took control of government functions. The revolution hadn't come from human weapons, but from human truth. 1 week later, Jackson stood beside Admiral Wilson as the newly formed Voldari Civilian Council signed the peace accords aboard the UES Redemption. "Is it enough?" Jackson asked quietly. After New Anchorage, Wilson placed a hand on his shoulder. "Justice isn't the same as vengeance, Lieutenant." Dr. Carter understood that. "I think she'd be proud of how we finished what she started." As the Voldari representatives completed the signing, and aid approached with a communication from Earth, the Security Council had unanimously approved the establishment of the Carter Accords, a new framework for interspecies relations based on transparency, respect, and the right of all civilizations to develop without interference or intimidation. The sleeping warships would remain awake, a reminder of humanity's capacity for both creation and destruction. But their purpose had evolved from instruments of vengeance to guardians of a fragile peace, one built not on fear, but on the truth that Dr. Melissa Carter had given her life to seek.